My name is Claire Reynolds. I'm 29 years old and I flew home last week for my father's 60th birthday dinner. We hadn't seen each other in 2 years. I thought this would be a special moment, something to remind us all that no matter what's happened, family is still family. But the moment I stepped into that elegant dining room, everything changed. My sister Julia met me with a polite smile. She glanced at the gift in my hands, an old watch I'd spent weeks tracking down, and said calmly, "This table's for family only." She pointed to a smaller table by the kitchen. A sign on it read, "Additional guests." I stood there stunned. I was her sister, my father's daughter. But somehow I wasn't considered family anymore. Have you ever felt like an outsider in your own family? Like the people who should know you best have quietly erased your place? If that's something you've lived through, stick with me. This story might be for you. And if you feel brave enough, tell me in the comments, have you ever been told you didn't belong without anyone saying the words, "I hadn't been home in over 2 years"? Life in New York kept moving fast, deadlines, meetings, late nights. The longer I stayed away, the harder it became to come back. But when Dad called me and said it would mean the world if you came, I knew I had to go. He didn't ask much. He never did. But his voice cracked a little when he said everyone's going to be there. That everyone included Julia, my older sister. 3 years apart, but once we were inseparable. Growing up, we shared everything, bedroom walls, secrets, inside jokes. She taught me how to braid my hair. I taught her how to use email. We were a team, back then. But time changes people. Distance turns closeness into awkwardness, and silence grows roots. Still, I believed maybe, just maybe, this dinner could fix something. A birthday felt like a good excuse to start over. I packed my suitcase with more hope than clothes. I even wrapped the vintage watch in soft tissue, tied it with navy ribbon, Dad's favorite color. On the flight back, I stared out the window and whispered to myself, maybe she's changed. Maybe I have too. But I had no idea what was waiting on the other side. Julia wasn't just my sister, she was my first best friend. When I was 6, she taught me how to ride a bike, hands steady on the seat until I found balance. When I got braces, she wrote jokes on sticky notes and left them on my mirror every morning. Even when she got her own friends, she always had time for me. I remember one summer, we must have been 11 and 8. We spent hours on the screened porch making friendship bracelets and planning our someday lives. She said she wanted to be a teacher. I said I wanted to design clothes. Back then, we believed anything was possible. Our family wasn't rich, but we had enough. Dad worked long hours at the plant. Mom ran a small flower shop downtown. Weekends meant picnics, hiking, or just doing puzzles at the kitchen table. It was quiet, predictable, safe. We didn't know that safety was borrowed time. If someone had told me back then that Julia would one day look me in the eye and call me a guest, I wouldn't have believed them. But something shifted when I turned 14, and it never shifted back. The change started small. Mom and Dad began arguing, but only late at night. Whispers behind closed doors. Tense silence at breakfast. Julia and I didn't talk about it. We just knew. Then the whispers became shouting. Dad slept in the guest room. Mom drank wine earlier each day. Julia held my hand during those nights. "I'm here," she'd whisper. "We're okay." But we weren't. By the time I turned 14, divorce papers were signed. Dad moved out. The house felt empty, too quiet, too clean, too broken. That was the first time Julia pulled away. She sided with Mom completely, wouldn't go to Dad's apartment, refused to talk to him. I tried to stay close to both, visited Dad on weekends, helped Mom at the flower shop, but Julia saw that as betrayal. She started calling Dad him like he wasn't ours anymore, and I became the daughter who chose wrong. I didn't know it at the time, but that's when our bond, our sisterhood began to fracture. Not with a fight, not with yelling, just with silence and space, and a growing wall neither of us would name. And then came Helen, and everything got worse. Helen wasn't the problem, but she became the symbol of everything Julia couldn't forgive. Dad met her 2 years after the divorce. They met at a community fundraiser. He told me she brought cookies and wore yellow gloves. She was kind, soft-spoken, always asked about school, about my sketches, never tried too hard. But she did try. She'd bring homemade muffins when I visited Dad. She even kept art supplies for me at her apartment. I never called her mom. She never asked me to. We weren't close, but she made room for me. And at 14, that meant something. Julia hated her on sight. She's just trying to replace mom, she snapped. Dad tried explaining. I did too. But Julia wouldn't hear it. She rolled her eyes, crossed her arms, stayed home. When Dad and Helen got married, just a courthouse ceremony, I stood beside him. Julia refused to come. Mom said nothing, just smiled when Julia stayed in bed that day. I remember holding the bouquet for Helen. She looked nervous. I whispered, "You're okay." I meant it. Even then, I knew Helen wasn't the villain. She was just caught in someone else's war, but to Julia, I'd crossed a line, and she never really spoke to me the same way again. After the wedding, Julia changed. Not all at once, but little by little, she built a new version of herself. In Mom's house, she became the golden child, the loyal one, the good daughter who never forgave Dad and never let anyone else forget. Meanwhile, I split my time. Weekends with Dad and Helen, weekdays at home. I thought I was keeping the peace, but in Julia's eyes, I was picking sides and not hers. Mom started making quiet comments, small things, but they stayed with me. At least Julia knows where her loyalty is. Some people forget who stood by them. Each word drove the wedge deeper. Between me and Julia. Between me and Mom. I stopped sharing things. Stopped asking Julia to come to the movies. Stopped waiting for her to knock on my door. By the time I graduated high school, we barely spoke. She stayed in town, went to the state university, moved in with Greg, her high school boyfriend. I left. Went to New York for design school. And in some strange way that sealed it. Julia became the daughter who stayed. I became the one who left. No one said it out loud. But it was clear I didn't belong the same way anymore. New York gave me space. And in that space, I started to breathe. I rented a tiny apartment with creaky floors and a view of a brick wall. I didn't care. It was mine. I worked long hours, internships, part-time jobs, late nights sewing mock-ups for class. But I was building something. A life. Phone calls with Dad became my comfort. He'd ask about my projects, send photos of Helen's garden. We talked every Sunday like clockwork. Mom would text sometimes, mostly short things. Happy birthday. Stay safe. Julia got a promotion. Julia never called. She'd post pictures of family dinners I wasn't told about. Smiling group shots where I was missing. Eventually, I stopped expecting invitations. Over the next 7 years, she got married. Had 2 kids, Ethan and Lily. I saw their faces in Christmas cards. Never in person. She became the one who planned everything, holidays, birthdays, reunions. She was the gatekeeper, and me, I became a line at the bottom of the group text. Don't forget to include Claire. Even then, I still believed it wasn't personal. Maybe life had just moved on. But deep down, a quiet truth was forming. Some people wanted it that way. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon. I was folding laundry when the phone rang. Dad. His name still made me pause. I answered with a smile already forming, but his voice held something I didn't expect: hesitation. "Claire." "I know, it's been a while," he said softly. "My 60th is coming up. Julia's putting together a dinner." He paused, then added, "It would mean a lot if you came." I sat down slowly. 2 years had passed since my last visit. 2 Christmases missed. 2 birthdays, plenty of reasons, none that felt good now. "Everyone will be there," he continued. "Your mom, Helen, the kids. It's just dinner, but I'd really like to see you." There was no pressure in his words, but there was hope, worn and fragile. And I realized I missed him too, more than I'd admitted. "I'll come," I said. "I already miss the coffee shop on Main Street," he chuckled. "It's still there. They even upgraded the chairs." That night, I searched for flights, wrapped the vintage watch in a soft scarf, and whispered to myself, maybe this is the moment we all remember who we are. I didn't know it yet. But I wasn't flying into a celebration. I was flying into a storm. I landed in Hartford just after noon. The airport was quiet, familiar but somehow smaller than I remembered. As I waited for my luggage, I called Mom, just to let her know I'd arrived. Her voice was polite, Not cold, but distant, like speaking to someone she hadn't decided how to feel about. "Oh, Claire, I wish we had room for you," she said quickly. "Julia and the kids are staying here while their basement gets renovated." I blinked. The house had 4 bedrooms. "It's just too crowded right now," she added. "You understand, right?" I swallowed hard. "Yeah, no worries. I booked a hotel anyway." That wasn't true, but it would be now. I ended the call and sat in the rental car, letting the quiet press in. I wasn't angry, just tired. I drove to the Courtyard Marriott by the interstate. Neutral territory. Not too far, not too close. The woman at the front desk smiled kindly as I checked in. She asked if I was in town for something special. "Just a family dinner," I said, and smiled like that wasn't the strangest sentence I'd said all year. I unpacked in silence. A suitcase full of carefully chosen outfits, and a little less hope than before. The next morning, I drove downtown. Main Street looked almost the same, brick sidewalks, the old clock tower, familiar shops tucked between new cafes. I wasn't just looking for a gift. I was looking for something that said, "I still know you, Dad. I still care." 3 months earlier, during one of our Sunday calls, he'd mentioned a watch. Not just any watch. A vintage Omega Seamaster from the 1960s. The one Paul Newman wore, he said, with a boyish grin in his voice. It was too expensive, too rare. But I remembered. I'd spent weeks researching, checking dealers, messaging collectors. And I found one used but real. Worn, but still beautiful. I walked into the little shop on Maple Street. The same bell above the door still rang when it opened. The watch waited in a velvet box already reserved in my name. As the clerk wrapped it, I held the box carefully like it was more than metal and glass. It felt like something solid. A bridge. A piece of history we both shared. That night, I placed it gently in my suitcase. Beside it, a handwritten card. For the man who always made time for me even when I stayed away. We met for coffee the next morning, just Dad and me. No schedules, no expectations. The old diner we used to go to was gone, replaced by a trendy cafe with exposed brick and Edison bulbs. Dad was already there, sitting near the window, hands wrapped around a steaming cup. His hair had gone fully gray, more lines around his eyes, but his smile, exactly the same. "There's my girl," he said, standing to hug me. His coat smelled like mint gum and aftershave, and for a second I was 10 again. We talked for over an hour. He told me about his work, his half-retirement plans, Helen's new herb garden. I told him about the magazine, my promotion, the feature I was writing on sustainable fashion. When I asked about Julia, he hesitated. "She's been working hard on this dinner," he said carefully. "She wants it to be nice. The kids are getting big. Ethan just started kindergarten." I nodded, pretending those milestones didn't sting. "Julia's excited to see you," he added. But his eyes said, maybe not. "I've missed you," I said, and meant it more than I expected. He reached across the table, gave my hand a squeeze. "We're proud of you, Claire. Always." Back at the hotel, I opened my suitcase, laid the forest green wrap dress across the bed. Simple, elegant, my safest choice. It said, "I'm doing well, but I'm not here to show off." As I steamed the wrinkles out, my phone buzzed. It was from Julia. Short, direct, dinners at 7, business casual, valet available, no greeting, no looking forward to seeing you, just logistics. I stared at the screen for a while, typed out 3 different replies, deleted them all, finally sent, "Thanks. See you there." It wasn't much, but it was all I had the energy for. I placed the watch box into my purse, checked the ribbon, adjusted the bow. Everything about that night would be measured. My outfit, my words, even my smile. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, practiced the safest small talk. "The kids have grown so much. The restaurant looks perfect. Your hair looks great long." Things no one could argue with, things that wouldn't stir the past. But beneath all that prep, my stomach tightened, and a small voice inside whispered, "Please let this go well." The restaurant sat on a quiet corner of downtown. Warm lights spilled through tall windows. Elegant, but not flashy, just like Dad liked it. I arrived 15 minutes early. Old habits from my magazine job on time meant late. The hostess greeted me with a smile. Richard's party, you're the first to arrive. Feel free to wait at the bar. I ordered a glass of red wine, sipped slowly, watched the door. My heart beat faster with every familiar face that entered. Uncle Ben and Aunt Carol walked in first, all smiles, arms wide open. Claire Carol pulled me into a hug that smelled like lavender and hairspray. You look beautiful. It's been too long. Ben gave me a warm grin. New York, treating you well. Their kindness hit me harder than I expected, like I hadn't realized how much I needed it. Next came cousins I hadn't seen in years, Rachel Thomas, even Aunt Ruth from Boston. Every greeting stitched something back together. And then Helen arrived. A navy blue dress, silver earrings, and that same quiet grace. She hugged me gently. He's going to be so happy you came, she whispered. It's the best gift you could have given him. And for a moment, I felt like I truly belonged. She walked in 10 minutes later. Mom. Hair, freshly colored, styled smooth, cream-colored pantsuit, polished, poised, like she was attending a fundraiser, not a family dinner. Our eyes met across the room. Her smile formed slowly, pleasant, practiced. Claire, she said, approaching with open arms. You made it. Her hug was brief, not cold, but careful, like we were acquaintances, not mother and daughter. You look well, she said, stepping back. The city agrees with you. Thanks, I replied. So do you. An awkward pause lingered between us. She glanced around. Julia's running late. Greg had a work call, and you know how it is with kids. I nodded, unsure what to say. The last time I saw her was 2 Christmases ago, a quick hello in the driveway as I dropped off gifts. Even then, it felt like she was already somewhere else. More relatives arrived, filling the room with soft chatter and laughter. I drifted toward them, grateful for the buffer. But the weight of her smile stayed with me. Not what it showed, but what it didn't. I had come home, but I couldn't tell if anyone truly noticed. The doors opened again, and there she was, Julia, hair lighter, now soft caramel highlights, a structured blazer over a silk blouse. One arm looped through Greg's. Behind them, Ethan bounced with restless energy. Lily clung to a stuffed rabbit, eyes wide at the crowd. Julia moved through the room like she owned it. Confident, efficient, greeting relatives with warm smiles, kisses on cheeks. But not me. She looked right past me, straight to Mom. They hugged tightly, murmured something I couldn't hear. Laughed. Only after greeting nearly everyone else did she turn my way. Claire, she said, you actually came. It could have sounded warm, but it didn't. I wouldn't miss Dad's birthday, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Good to see you, Julia. She gave me a brief hug, shoulders stiff, eyes already elsewhere. Then she knelt beside Ethan. Say hi to Aunt Claire, she prompted. You remember the pictures, right? Hi, he said shyly. Lily hid behind her legs. I smiled gently. It's so good to finally meet you. I looked at Julia again. She was smoothing Lily's hair, not looking at me. Something had shifted, and I couldn't pretend I didn't feel it anymore. The room shifted again when he walked in. Dad. Surprised eyes, a wide, unfiltered smile spreading across his face. He hadn't known we'd all made it. Hadn't known Julia kept the guest list quiet. Happy birthday, someone called. Glasses lifted. A chorus of cheers. He laughed. A real one, deep, joyful. Helen stood beside him, beaming. His eyes scanned the room and then landed on me. They softened. His shoulders dropped just a little. He made his way over, cutting through small talk and camera flashes. Wrapped me in a hug before saying a word. You came, he whispered. You're really here. I nodded against his shoulder. Wouldn't miss it, Dad? Helen raised her glass for a toast. To Richard, a father who never stops showing up even when the rest of us fall short. Laughter, cheers. The clinking of glasses filled the air. For that moment, just one I felt folded back in, like nothing had changed. His arm stayed around my shoulder. Mine stayed there too, and for those few minutes, I wasn't the sister who left. I wasn't the outsider. I was just Claire, his daughter, and he was proud. The private room is ready, the hostess said, appearing beside Julia with perfect timing. She motioned toward the back. If everyone will follow me. We moved in a slow procession past the main dining floor under warm chandeliers into a room lined with dark wood and crisp white linens. The long table stretched across the center. Elegant place settings, floral arrangements in soft blues and greens, Dad's favorite colors. Framed photos lined the center. Snapshots from years past, I walked along scanning the faces. Family vacations, graduation smiles, Julia's wedding, but none of me. Not from the last 7 years. Not a single photo. I tightened my grip on the gift bag. The watch felt heavier in my hand. Everyone began finding their seats. Small name cards waited at each place. I stepped toward the main table. Dad, Helen, Mom, Julia, already seated. The kids giggling beside their plates. I looked for mine, and that's when she stepped in front of me. Julia. Her expression didn't change. Her voice was calm, quiet, but carried just enough to be heard. Sorry, she said. This table's for family only. She pointed behind me to a small table near the service door. A sign read, additional guests. For a second, I thought I'd heard her wrong. But Julia didn't blink. Her hand still pointed toward the smaller table. Her smile didn't move. I stood frozen. Not embarrassed. Not yet. Just confused. The room's a bit tight, she added smoothly. We had to split the seating. Hope that's okay. My eyes scanned the main table again. Dad, Helen, Mom, Julia, Greg, the kids, all with space, all family. I turned toward the other table, smaller, tucked near the back wall, already half filled with distant cousins and Dad's old coworker. A folded name card sat at the corner, Claire Reynolds. My name, my seat. The conversations in the room didn't stop, but the air felt different, like something unseen had just shifted. Dad looked up puzzled. He opened his mouth, but Julia touched his arm. We planned the layout, she said quickly. Let's not make a scene. Helen's eyes widened. Mom said nothing. I forced a smile. It's fine. But it wasn't. Each step toward that side table felt like walking away from something I had spent years trying to hold on to. The chair creaked slightly as I sat down. The table was nice, clean linen, polished silverware, but it wasn't the table. Not the one with the laughter. Not the one where Dad sat. A woman I didn't know offered a polite smile. I'm Patricia, she said. My husband worked with your dad years ago. I nodded. Claire. I placed the gift under my chair, out of sight, out of reach. At the main table, the energy buzzed. Ethan knocked over his juice. Greg caught it mid-fall. Everyone laughed, except me. I watched Mom pass a bread basket. Julia cut Lily's food into tiny squares. No one looked over. No one called me back. I could hear fragments of stories, vacations I hadn't joined, jokes I didn't know. I wasn't angry, not yet. But there was a stillness in my chest, like something inside had stopped moving. I took a sip of water, forced my breathing to stay steady. A birthday dinner. One evening. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself to let it go. But the truth sat heavier than the meal in front of me. I had a seat at a table, just not at theirs. The waiter brought bread to the main table first, then drinks, then appetizers. We waited. Across the room, Julia laughed at something Greg said. Mom leaned in to whisper something to Helen. Dad smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Every few minutes he looked toward my table. Quick glances, small hesitations, but he stayed seated. I understood. He didn't want tension tonight. Didn't want conflict on his birthday. Still, the silence around me was louder than any toast. Someone at my table asked where I lived. I answered politely. Brooklyn, fashion editor. Busy, but fulfilling. They smiled. But I could see it. They didn't know why I wasn't at the other table either. I kept glancing toward the watch box under my chair. So carefully chosen, so lovingly wrapped, now hidden. I had planned to give it to him during dinner, to watch his face light up, to feel even for a second like I had brought something no one else could. But now it felt awkward, like giving it would break some invisible rule, or worse, looked like I was trying too hard to belong. I pushed my fork through a piece of salmon and felt something tighten in my throat. Dessert was clearing when Julia stood. She clinked her glass lightly. "Before the kids get tired," she said, "let's do gifts now." Everyone leaned in. Greg handed over 2 sleek envelopes. "Tickets to that Broadway show you mentioned, Tom." Mom stepped forward next, a polished leather briefcase, expensive and formal. "Something useful," she smiled. Then Helen placed a small wrapped box in Dad's hands, a first edition Hemingway novel. He gasped. "You remembered." I waited, my fingers brushing the soft ribbon on the watch box. Julia cleared her throat. "Anyone else?" she asked, scanning the table. Her eyes didn't land on me. I stood slowly, walked over. "Happy birthday, Dad," I said, voice steady but quiet. He opened the box, paused, then drew in a sharp breath. "Claire, is this—" He held it like something sacred. "The Seamaster. You found one?" His hands trembled slightly. He turned it over, eyes shining. "This is incredible." That was the moment, the one I had imagined. Real simple, full of love. And then Julia spoke. "Let's cut the cake before the kids melt down." Just like that, the moment passed. The box was set aside. The plates came out, and the one thing that felt real was swallowed up by small talk. I returned to the side table, my seat now colder than before. The laughter from the main table rolled on, forks clinking against plates, cake being passed around. I watched Julia lean over to whisper something to Greg. He nodded, but didn't smile. She caught my eye for a second, smirked, then turned away. I didn't belong to that table. Not in her world. Not in the one she built so carefully. Each word exchanged between relatives felt like a language I used to know but had forgotten. I laughed at the right moments, nodded when spoken to, but I wasn't really there anymore. Just floating, listening from behind a glass wall, present but blurred at the edges. I noticed Dad glance toward the watch box once. Just once. Then he turned back to help Lily with her napkin. The watch lay on the sideboard surrounded by tissue paper and ribbon, set down like something temporary. I sipped cold coffee, the bitterness matching the quiet that had settled in my chest. They hadn't kicked me out, they just placed me elsewhere, and somehow that hurt even more. "Excuse me," I said softly. No one looked up. I folded my napkin beside my half-eaten dessert, walked slowly through the private room, head down, hands tight at my sides. The restroom was empty. Muted light, polished tiles, soft music playing. I chose the farthest stall, locked the door, and sat down. For a moment, I just breathed. Then the tears came, quiet, contained like I didn't want to disturb even the walls. I covered my mouth with one hand, felt the tissue crumple in the other. I wasn't just crying about the table, it was everything. All the birthdays missed, all the conversations never had, all the ways I'd slowly disappeared from their story. Julia hadn't changed overnight. She had been drawing this line for years, and I had let her. Maybe it was easier to stay away, to avoid the ache of not being welcomed, to call myself busy instead of excluded. But here, under warm lights and soft jazz, I could no longer pretend it didn't hurt. I had come home, and still I had no place. Just 4 walls, a locked door, and my reflection waiting in the mirror. I stepped out of the stall after a while, washed my hands slowly, avoided my eyes in the mirror until I couldn't anymore. The woman staring back looked tired. Smudged mascara, tense jaw, eyes that had seen too much and said too little. I reached for a paper towel, dabbed at the corners of my eyes, fixed my lipstick. Something about that small act reclaiming my reflection made me pause. I thought about what Dr. Myers once told me, the therapist I saw after Mom forgot to tell me about Julia's wedding. "Sometimes we participate in our own exclusion," she said. "By staying silent, we let others define our place." Back then, I thought I was keeping peace, not adding fuel, choosing grace. But tonight, sitting at the edge of a room full of people I loved, I realized I'd also chosen invisibility. Maybe not on purpose, but still. Julia drew the map, but I followed it. I let her decide where I fit. I accepted the seat, the silence, the scraps of closeness. And now, I didn't know who I was more upset with, her or myself. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I almost didn't check it. Didn't want more reminders of the world outside this dinner or the one inside it. But the name made me smile. Lisa, my closest friend in New York, chosen family, steady voice. "How's the dinner going?" she'd written. I stared at the screen, thumbs hovering. What could I even say that my sister assigned me a table with people who barely knew my name, that my father tried to smile through the ache, that my gift, the one I poured months into, was brushed aside like a party favor? I typed, "Not great." Julia made sure I'm seated separately from everyone else. The reply came fast. "What, are you serious? That's insane. Want me to call with a fake emergency?" I almost laughed. Almost. Then she added, "Claire, don't let them shrink you. You deserve to be there fully." Her words landed somewhere deep, in a place I'd kept quiet for too long. Not angry, not bitter, just tired of proving I belonged. I looked back at the mirror. Same eyes, but now a flicker of something behind them. Not sadness, something steadier. Resolve. I stood in front of the mirror a little longer. Let the silence settle. Then I picked up the mascara wand, steadied my hand. Not to impress, not to prove, just to remind myself I was still here, still visible. I reapplied my lipstick, same soft rose I wore in high school, adjusted my earrings, smoothed my dress, each motion small but solid, each one pulling me back into myself. I wasn't the girl who used to wait quietly for a place at the table. Not anymore. I had flown home, bought the gift, showed up, smiled. I had done everything right, and still it wasn't enough to earn a seat. But maybe that was the problem, trying to earn what should have been mine all along. I checked my phone one more time. Lisa had sent one final message. "Whatever you do next, make sure it's yours, not theirs." I locked the screen, slipped the phone into my clutch, and walked out of the restroom, not quietly, not small, but with the calm of someone who had finally stopped apologizing for existing. The hallway felt quieter this time, or maybe I had stopped bracing for impact. I walked slowly, heels soft against the carpet. The sound of silverware and quiet conversation floated from the private room. The dinner was winding down, dessert plates cleared, coffee being poured. I paused just outside the doorway, took one long breath. Not to calm down, but to steady something new inside me. Then I stepped in. No one noticed at first. Julia was retelling a story from Ethan's first day of school. Mom was nodding along. Dad was smiling but distracted. My seat at the side table sat empty. Still waiting, but I didn't walk to it. Not this time. I crossed the room, not quickly, not loud, but with purpose. I stopped between the two tables, right in that invisible space I had occupied all evening. The middle ground no one else wanted to name. And I lifted my coffee cup, fingers steady, voice clear. I'd like to make a toast. Forks paused, chairs shifted. Julia's smile froze. Dad looked up, surprise in his eyes, and just like that, the room belonged to me. I looked at Dad, held his gaze. "Most of you know me, but maybe not well anymore. I'm Claire, Tom's younger daughter." A few polite chuckles. Someone lifted a glass in quiet acknowledgement. I didn't rush, didn't fill the silence. Let the words breathe. "I haven't been home much these last few years. Work city life?" Excuses, I told myself. But the truth is harder. Julia shifted slightly. Mom's smile faded just a little. Distance isn't always miles. Sometimes it's moments, missed calls, unsaid things, empty chairs. I glanced briefly at my table in the corner. Still untouched, still waiting. Then back to Dad, but even when I was far, I never stopped caring. Never stopped calling on Sundays. Never stopped wondering how everyone was doing. I saw his eyes soften, a small nod barely there. "And Dad, you once told me integrity means doing the right thing even if it's uncomfortable. So tonight I'm doing just that." I set my cup down gently. No drama, no tears, just truth. Because family isn't about where you sit. It's about who you show up for and who shows up for you. For a moment, no one spoke. The kind of silence that isn't awkward, just full. Julia stared at me unreadable. Greg looked down. Mom blinked slowly, lips pressed together. I didn't flinch, didn't fill the space. Then from the far end of the table, Uncle Ben cleared his throat. She's right, just 2 words. But they cracked the air. He set down his glass and leaned forward. This seating never felt right to me. Claire belongs with her family. Period. Helen nodded quickly. I should have said something too, she added, voice soft, but I didn't want to cause a scene. Julia's jaw tightened. She opened her mouth, but before she could speak, Mom interjected. Let's not turn this into a debate, she said sharply. It's Tom's birthday. I turned toward her. Still calm. Exactly. And that's why I'm standing here, because tonight should be about him, not about keeping old lines drawn. The room began to shift, not loud, but real. Chairs leaned in, eyes softened, and for the first time in years I felt the ground beneath me stop moving. I looked back at Dad. He was still holding the watch, not like a gift, but like a memory returned. I took a breath, not to steady myself, but to speak with all of me. I bought this watch months ago, not to impress you or make up for anything, but because I remembered what mattered to you. His eyes glistened. He didn't blink. You always made time for people. Even when they didn't always make time for you, I stepped closer, set my hand gently on the table between us. So this is me, choosing to make time again. To stop showing up small and start showing up real. I glanced around the room. Faces I had grown up with, some who had forgotten, some who were remembering now. Family doesn't need to agree on everything, but we should be honest about who we've become and who we still want to be to each other. I smiled, not out of politeness, but peace. Happy birthday, Dad. Thank you for teaching me what it means to return. And just like that, the weight I'd carried for years didn't feel so heavy anymore. He didn't speak right away. Dad just looked at me, long and full, like he was seeing the child I was and the woman I'd become at the same time. Then he stood, one hand still holding the watch. The room quieted again. He stepped around the table, slow, deliberate. No one moved, not even Julia. When he reached me, he didn't make a speech, didn't try to smooth things over. He simply pulled me into a hug, tight, full of everything we hadn't said over the years. He whispered, I never needed you to prove anything. I held on, not just to him, but to the truth in those words. When he pulled back, he smiled, not the kind meant for company, but the one I used to see on Sunday mornings. He held up the watch for a second, then slid it onto his wrist. It fit, not just in size, but in meaning. He turned to the room. Let's move some chairs, he said. Feels like we've got the wrong table sizes tonight. Laughter. Relief. And just like that, the lines began to blur. While chairs shifted and relatives stood to help, I caught her glance. Julia, still seated, hands folded neatly in her lap, her posture perfect, her face unreadable. She hadn't spoken a word since I raised my cup. Greg leaned toward her, murmured something. She didn't answer. She looked at Dad, then at the empty chair beside him, then at me. Our eyes met, not long, not warm, but not hate either. Just distance, old layered and sharp around the edges. I gave her the smallest nod. Not a truce, not a win, just an acknowledgement. I see you. I'm not here to erase you. Her jaw tightened slightly. She looked away, then slowly stood, lifted Lily from her booster seat, helped Ethan down. She walked over to Dad's side of the room, offered a tight smile, and began helping shift the chairs. Still quiet, still guarded, but she stayed. That was something, not resolution, not yet, but a crack in the wall she had spent years building, and I knew the hardest part hadn't passed. But maybe now we weren't pretending anymore. The room slowly found a new shape. Chairs rearranged, conversations picking back up, less staged, more real. I slipped toward the side, letting the noise move without me. That's when Helen appeared beside me, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. She offered one with a soft smile. Still take it with oat milk? I blinked, then smiled. You remember that? She nodded. I pay attention, even when I'm quiet. We sat together along the back wall, watching the others mingle, kids chasing crumbs, cousins trading stories, dad laughing finally at ease. Helen didn't fill the silence. She just sipped present, like she always had been. After a moment, she said, "You gave him something tonight he's been missing for a long time." I looked over. Dad was showing Uncle Ben the watch, his face lit like a boy again. Helen continued, "It's not the watch, Claire, it's you. Showing up." I swallowed, the warmth behind my eyes rising again. "I always felt like I was in between," I said quietly. "Like if I spoke up, I'd make things worse." She reached over, touched my hand. "You didn't make it worse. You made it honest." I stood to refill my cup. The air felt lighter now, not fixed, but no longer pretending. Near the dessert table, Greg was stirring cream into his coffee. He saw me approach, then looked around like making sure Julia wasn't close. He offered a nod. I returned it. We stood side by side for a moment, saying nothing. Then he spoke. That took guts. I glanced at him. Wasn't trying to be brave. Just tired of being quiet. He gave a soft laugh. "It's been hard watching you disappear from this family." He paused. "She misses you more than she says." I raised an eyebrow. "Julia?" He shrugged. "She just doesn't know how to handle being second in the room, even when no one's keeping score." I looked at him closely. His face wasn't bitter, just worn. He sipped his coffee. "I think tonight cracked something open." I nodded slowly. "Cracks let the light in, I guess." He gave me a small smile. "Just be patient with her. She doesn't bend easy." "I don't either," I said, but I said it kindly, and for the first time I felt like someone had been standing near the line but hadn't drawn it. Most of the guests had gone. Coates collected hugs, exchanged Lily, asleep on Julia's shoulder, Ethan dragging a balloon across the floor. I stayed behind, helping Helen fold napkins, quietly packing up leftover cake. Dad found me by the window, watching the night fold over the city. He stood beside me in silence, then said softly, "Thanks for tonight." I turned to him. "You don't have to say that." "I know," he replied. "But I want to." He looked down at his wrist, then back at me. "You were never out of this family, Claire. Some people just made the room smaller than it needed to be." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I thought staying quiet was being respectful," I whispered. "Turns out it just made me disappear." He reached over, placed a hand gently on my shoulder. "You're not invisible, honey. Not to me. Not ever." The lights flickered slightly as the staff began to close down. Time to leave. But I let myself stay in that moment one breath longer, because this time I wasn't rushing out the door. I wasn't slipping away. I had shown up fully, and he had seen me. I stepped out into the night. The air was crisp, cool against my skin, the kind of air that wakes you up but doesn't sting. Downtown was quieter now. Shops closed, streetlights casting long shadows. I walked slowly toward the hotel, heels clicking gently against the pavement. But I wasn't hurrying, not running from the silence, not carrying the ache I used to. I passed the restaurant window, caught a final glimpse of Julia helping Mom with Lily's coat, Helen laughing with a server, Dad waving one last goodbye. It wasn't perfect, wasn't tied with a bow, but it was different. Inside my bag, my phone buzzed once, a message from Lisa. "How are you?" I smiled. Typed back, not fixed, but better, because I didn't need the table. Didn't need every chair to turn in my direction. I had found something else tonight, not applause, not approval, but peace. And as I crossed the street, hands tucked in my coat, I realized I wasn't leaving empty. I was walking away whole. The hotel room was quiet. Warm light spilled across the bed, still neatly made. My dress hung from the back of the chair, creases from the day softening in the fabric. I kicked off my shoes, sat at the edge of the bed, not exhausted, just still. The kind of still that comes after truth. Not dramatic, not loud, just real. I opened the window slightly, let in the city, sounds, distant traffic, a dog barking, wind brushing through trees. Pulled out my phone. No new messages, but I wasn't waiting for one. I thought about the seating card, tucked it into my purse before I left. Claire Reynolds, additional guest. Tomorrow I'd throw it away, not out of anger, but because it didn't fit anymore. I glanced at the watch on my wrist, Dad's twin to the one I gave him. Time ticking forward, even and calm. I lay back, arms folded across my chest, not needing anything. Tonight didn't fix the past, but it gave me something better, a sense that what hurt no longer had to. Morning light crept across the room, soft and golden, pulling shadows out of corners. I stretched slowly. No alarms, no meetings, just breath. A gentle knock, then the sound of papers sliding against carpet. I waited a moment, then opened the door. No one there. Only a folded envelope on the floor. No name on the front. Just the soft weight of something unsaid. I sat on the bed, thumb brushing the edge. Opened it. One line. Julia's handwriting. I didn't know how to say it last night. But I saw you. I heard you. That was it. No apology. No explanation. But not nothing. I read it twice. Then a third time. Set it gently on the nightstand. My heart didn't race. My chest didn't tighten. Just a quiet warmth, like a door that hadn't opened in years wasn't locked after all. Maybe this wasn't forgiveness or even closeness, but it was a shift, a start, a line drawn not in defense, but in invitation. I folded my dress carefully, layered it between soft fabric, not rushed, not escaping. Each item into the suitcase felt lighter than when I'd arrived. No more quiet rehearsals in the mirror, no more wondering what I'd say if someone finally looked my way. I zipped the bag closed, slipped the note from Julia into the side pocket. Not to cling to it, but because it belonged to this chapter. The cab would arrive in 10 minutes. I stood by the window. Watched the city come alive again, familiar noise, unfamiliar peace inside me. This trip had asked more of me than I planned to give, but somehow I'd given it without breaking. My phone buzzed. Dad, let me know when you land. Proud of you. Always. I smiled. Typed back, will do. Love you, Dad. Then paused. Opened the message again. Added, thanks for seeing me last night. Not just being there, but really seeing me. I slipped my phone into my coat pocket. Took one last look at the room. Not for what happened in it, but for who I became inside its quiet walls. The terminal was quiet, not empty, just calm. Children with backpacks, a man asleep on his suitcase, a woman humming softly to herself. Gate B-17, flight on time. I sat near the window, watched planes taxi across the tarmac, everything in motion yet nothing rushed. I pulled out my notebook, blank page, pen in hand, wrote 2 lines. Coming home isn't always about the place. Sometimes it's about the courage to show up as you are. I closed the notebook, slipped it back into my bag. A boarding call echoed through the speakers. Rows 10 through 20. I stood, no weight in my chest, no second thoughts in my step. As I moved toward the gate, someone behind me laughed. The sound was easy free, and for the first time in a long while, I felt that same kind of lightness in me. The flight attendant scanned my ticket. Welcome aboard. I smiled. Not polite, not practiced, just real. Because I wasn't flying away from something. I was simply moving forward, finally whole. If this story touched something in you, a memory, a moment, a silence that still lingers, you're not alone. We'd love to hear what it brought up for you. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you'd like to walk with us on more journeys like this, hit subscribe. Your story matters here too.